decision by President Ramaphosa to incorporate the State Security Agency into the presidency raised eyebrows during the cabinet reshuffle, with some still arguing that he's creating a super presidency. But some say it should be seen as a return to constitutionality. Joining us now to discuss that point of view is former Intelligence Chief Mr. Mo Shaik. Mr. Shaik, good to have you with us on a Daytime Update. I remember when you appeared at the State Capture Commission in 2019, you yourself said that you don't believe in there being a Minister of Intelligence. Give us reasons why.
Well, tell me, for a few very good reasons. One is that the Constitution never intended that we should have a Minister of Intelligence, and that the negotiating position of the ANC in all of the negotiations through the multi-party talks, through CODESA, through the Transitional Executive Council of the Intelligence, and all of this was from 91 to 94, the ANC always held the position that it is the president that should take responsibility for intelligence. And you'll see that in the Constitution, the first and the preferred option is that the president assumes political responsibility for the intelligence services, and he may designate a member of cabinet to assume that responsibility. So the first option is that the president assumes it, and secondly, he may appoint a member of cabinet and not necessarily a member to cabinet, meaning it must be a member of cabinet already. And this is why President Nelson Mandela appointed the Minister of Justice, who was then the late Minister Dalla Omar, to assume the administrative responsibility for the intelligence services. So I do argue that it is a return to constitutionality, and that is what we should be welcoming.
So talk to us then, Mr. Shaik, about how we got to where we are, how we got to having a Minister of Intelligence when that wasn't initially the way that the intelligence sector was structured.
Yes, well, you'll recall that in 1995, President Mandela appointed the then Member of Parliament, Joan Plunkler, as the Deputy Minister and as the Coordinator of Intelligence. Now, the Coordinator of Intelligence had certain powers to coordinate the intelligence community. The Democratic Party, as they were then called, objected to the fact that a Member of Parliament, and in fact a member of the ruling party, the ANC, was appointed as the coordinator. They would have preferred that a civil servant be the coordinator of intelligence rather than a member of parliament, and they argued that it was about the separation of powers. Then the ANC decided at that time, in 97, to amend the legislation rather than ask Joan Plunkler to resign as a member of parliament, and there may have been very good reasons for that to have happened. So when you then appointed a member, when we amended the act, we removed certain powers of the coordinator and gave those powers to the minister. However, in the initial act, the minister was defined as the president. And this continued over the years, where the further and further amendments were made, bringing us to the point of the misalignment that we have today. So I think President Cyril Ramaphosa has been absolutely correct in returning everything to what was intended and starting from there. Now that we've got the constitutional imperative of the president taking control of the intelligence services, the design that will now emerge based on the advice of the National Security Advisor, based on the advice of the expert panel, the design of the intelligence services would be in accordance with the Constitution.
So talk to us about the various amendments that have taken place within the Ministry of Intelligence. You were saying that with each and every amendment that was made by each and every minister that has taken up that role, gave more and more powers to the minister and moved a lot of functionalities into the office of the minister. Talk to us about some of those powers that then moved to the ministers instead of staying within the presidency, and what the impact of that has been.
Okay. So in the beginning, it was intended that, and if you read the Constitution, it will say that only the president can establish an intelligence service. Now, and what do we mean by the establishment of an intelligence service? Well, firstly, to declare a national capability as an intelligence service, to set up the structures, to define their functions, etc. In the subsequent amendments, in other words, the amendments from 1997 onwards, the minister assumed that power. So the minister started to establish structures. The ministers had the right to appoint members. The ministers had the right to transfer members. And the minister has certain powers in respect of the administration of the intelligence services. And this brought it into conflict with, well, what then is the role of the Director General? Because if the Director General has absolutely no power and is subject to all the powers that needs to be approved by the minister, you then have what I call in the article co-management. And yet the PMFA would argue that the Director General is the accounting officer and must be held responsible for the administration of the budget. But here we have powers that the minister executes, and often there is no agreement between the minister and the Director General. This leads to an enormous level of dysfunctionality, especially if the minister does not agree with the recommendations of the Director General. Then the minister exerts what we call a veto over the powers of the Director General. And that's why I say it is this conflict that has been at the center of all the problems that we've had in the intelligence services. Who, in fact, runs the intelligence services? Now, the power going back to the president may decide, for the purposes of the administration, that he may delegate his functions to a minister. But from the way I understand it, the president is going to retain those powers, which means that there's no conflict between the president and the Director General.
And this is the problem that you yourself experienced. You had problems reporting to the Minister of Intelligence. Can you give us some practical examples of perhaps decisions that were made that you felt should not have been made or would not have been made if you were indeed reporting directly to the president?
So let me give you an example. I, as the head of the Secret Service, would appoint declared representatives abroad. Now, in order to do that, it goes through an internal process where people have to apply for this. There are various committees in the department that then says person X is the best candidate. The minister may not agree that person X is the best candidate, and the minister may want to appoint someone that he or she thinks is a better candidate than what the internal process came up with. And we have had that experience. I, for one, had that experience with Minister Twele, where Minister Twele had a preference that was different from what the department came up with. And then, you know, you've got to say, well, the minister will so decide because the minister has the power to do that. But that is not necessarily in the best interest of good governance, and it is not necessarily in the best interest of running a department, because if the members of intelligence services comes to understand that the Director General actually has no power and that the minister has more power than the Director General, well, they will go over the head of the Director General and go directly to the minister. And that is what we've had, where it promotes a culture of favoritism. It promotes a culture of management by the minister rather than management in accordance with the PMFA by the Director General. And this is the source of many, many of the conflicts that we've had.
Mr. Shaik, we saw the State Security Agency being under the spotlight once again at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. Now, this was actually formed by former President Jacob Zuma. Talk to us about the impact of the formation of that State Security Agency, what it was supposed to do, and how it changed the entire intelligence landscape.
Well, when we designed the intelligence services in 1994-95, which started, as I said, from the negotiation process, the first thing that we did not want to do was to concentrate too much of intelligence power in one organization. This is why we had two organizations. We had the domestic intelligence and we had the foreign intelligence. What former President Jacob Zuma did was brought these two organizations together into one entity. And that was the concentration of too much power in one organization. That was never intended. We intended decentralization and coordination. What we had was concentration and lack of coordination. And the lack of coordination is what is so central to our challenges now. So police intelligence is doing one thing, the SSA domestic branch is doing their own thing, and no one is talking to one another. Whereas in the original design, we intended coordination amongst all the intelligence services, including departmental intelligence, to be very central to an effective and integrated system of intelligence. So hence, I say again, going back to the constitutional responsibility of the president allows us to correct all the misalignments that happen. And that is why I would agree that it is absolutely correct what President Cyril Ramaphosa has done. And I really wish that we all support it and look forward to a new intelligence dispensation.
Does this then mean an end to the SSA? Should there be an end to the SSA?
Well, I'm absolutely hoping there's an end to an SSA. Firstly, that name is awful. State Security Agency. Our intelligence services were never intended to be an agency that ensures the security of the state. Our intelligence agency is always intended in the Constitution to be a service to the well-being of the people of this country, not to secure the security of the state, but to secure the human security of all South Africans. It is a function for the well-being of the state, well-being of the country, not for the well-being of the state.
Mr. Mo Shaik.
So end the name SSA.
Mr. Mo Shaik, thank you very much for your time and your insight there discussing the issues of intelligence. He is the former Director General in Intelligence.